Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Badusky, and before I get started with my presentation, The Hidden Accelerator, I'd like to acknowledge that I live, work, and raise my family on Treaty 2 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Métis peoples, and within the broader homeland of many Indigenous nations who have cared for this land since time immemorial. My connection to Manitoba is deeply personal. I was raised across northern Manitoba, in Thompson, the Pas, Churchill, Cranberry Portage, before eventually planting roots in rural Manitoba in Rivers, where I have built my life since 2005. These communities shape my understanding of resilience, interdependence, and the importance of caring for one another. Growing up and living in rural and northern Manitoba taught me that community is not just a place, it's a responsibility. It is opening your door when someone needs help, sharing what you have, respecting the land that sustains us, and recognizing that we move through this world together. I carry a deep respect for the Indigenous peoples of this province and country, whose stewardship, knowledge, cultures, and traditions continue to guide and strengthen these lands and our communities. I'm grateful to live and work here, and I remain committed to listening, learning, and building relationships, and contributing to a future rooted in respect, truth, and shared humanity. Now, I didn't start out in education. I didn't start out in post-secondary education or K-12 education. I didn't start out in education at all. My career actually started out in business. And when I talk business, I don't mean the MBA I just eventually got a few years ago. I'm talking bootstrapped, boots on the ground, pulling yourself up, entrepreneurship, right from having an idea to doing every job possible, every job needed to be done in order to see that idea come to fruition. And I've had a lot of mishaps. I don't call them failures, I call them learning opportunities, and I've had a few successes along the way. But in 2020, my world changed just along with all of yours in a way I never could imagine. After almost 30 years of building my career and building my business, my legacy, COVID changed all of it. It shut down all three of the businesses that I was operating at the time, and didn't just shut them down locally, shut down the global economy and the international dealings that I had. It literally just pulled the rug out from under me, and for the first time in my entire life, I didn't have a job. I think I did what everybody else did. I sat around on the couch watching movies in my pajamas, eating a lot of chips and dip, and going, it's kind of like a vacation. How long could this pandemic last? Well, about 6 months into it, when I realized that this pandemic was going to last a while, I had to make a very tough decision. Was I going to adapt and pivot and, change the way I had been operating? Or was I going to take this as an opportunity to slow down for the first time in my life, reap some of the rewards I had been working so hard for, and maybe go in a different direction? And that's the pivot that brought me to post-secondary education. Because early in 2020, I started working with Assiniboine College, where I am still now today, and I started learning that all of that experience, all of that energy, really provided an insight into programming, into continuing education that I didn't know existed. That the skill sets I had been developing my whole life were valuable, and I had a talent for sharing them. I went in and finished or earned my Teaching for Learning certificate, so my adult education certificate, and started working on my MBA. Because for the first time in my entire life, I had time and money at the same time to pursue a post-secondary education. That's something I'd always dreamed of. But as I was working to pay the bills and feed my children and pulling myself up from the bootstraps, I never had the time to pursue my education. And those times that I did, I didn't have the money to pay for it. And COVID gave me an opportunity to do both. And what I discovered is that much like the escape rooms that I designed in my business life, and when I say I designed them, I really designed them. We didn't just build a brick and mortar escape room recreation facility, the first in Manitoba outside of Winnipeg, located in Brandon, Manitoba. I actually custom designed rooms and ended up selling my escape room designs all around the world. I have escape room designs, rooms that I built, well, designed, in 42 states and 13 different countries. So when COVID hit the industry, it hit me hard because it closed down escape rooms all around the world. And I miss that. I don't necessarily say I miss working 100 hours a week, but I did miss the creativity. And when I got to continuing studies and realized that what I was doing in escape room designs was so similar to curriculum development, I kind of found my calling. I discovered that the reverse engineering that we did in escape room design was very, very similar to blueprinting. And I started turning my passion for creativity into building curriculum and programs and courses the same way I designed escape rooms, except these ones were built on my own experiences, expertise, and knowledge that I gained as an entrepreneur and working in the business community for about 25 years. Obviously, since then, I've expanded and I work with other subject matter experts, but that pivot, that change seemed so natural to me. Sometimes when I explain it to others, they don't necessarily see the connection, but I know that if you're working in post-secondary, if you're working in curriculum development, if you're working in continuing education, I know you already see the connection, right? Because we are the entrepreneurs of post-secondary. 2020 didn't just change my career path, it changed the world of post-secondary institutions and education all around the globe. Everybody switched to the very comfortable, the familiar. We knew post-secondary as creating courses, students come to campus, they sit in a classroom, and we teach them. And for, some of you in bigger centers, maybe you had already been working on online courses, or, back in my day, my first management diploma was taken by correspondence. But that was back when you actually had to mail in your coursework and wait for it to come back. But for a lot of us, when COVID hit and that switch and that pivot to online learning came, not everybody was well adapted to it. And institutions that were able to switch rapidly or who were already working with online course materials, learning management systems, and who were already looking at the future of post-secondary education and continuing education, they were well ahead of the curve. And I think the focus was so much on base programming that continuing ed kind of, sat by the wayside for a little while into the pandemic. And once base programming kind of got figured out, once campuses started opening, once learning management systems were up and running and students were working towards their diplomas or their degrees, then there was time to take a breath and focus on what this meant for continuing education departments. And at this time, that is where I started kind of working, and I was leaning towards helping out in a program capacity. But I saw it in a way that maybe not everyone did, because I hadn't been working in continuing education before the pandemic. I was an entrepreneur. I was a business person. So coming into continuing studies after the pandemic, after these changes had occurred, gave me a very unique perspective compared to those who had been working in post-secondary for a long time, or for those who just came from that field. I came in as an entrepreneur, eyes wide open, going, what can I do? Where are the gaps? How do we solve problems? Because that's what entrepreneurs do. And that is what led me to working on my research for my MBA, where I specialized in human resource management, specifically in organizational learning and development, because I wanted to use this new career path to do the exact same thing I was doing as an entrepreneur. Solve problems and create pathways to relationships and eventually making money. Now, Simon Sinek will tell us that money is never the why. Money is a result, but it's never the purpose. And when I say that, you know what, we wanted to make money in continuing studies, that's not why we do it, but it is necessary. Continuing studies is a profit center, or it should be a profit center in post-secondary institutions. We go out, we find the skills gap, we give a product, or at least offer a product for a price. And those products are courses, workshops, diplomas, certificates, micro-credentials. Just like an entrepreneur in business, we see a need, we create a product and service, and we sell it, and that money helps us do more. That is what continuing studies does, and that is what continuing studies professionals are, the entrepreneurs of post-secondary education. So as I was starting my career in continuing education, after coming into it from my entrepreneurial background through the pandemic, I was really interested in how my perspective was different from some of those around me. And I wanted to do some more research on it. So throughout my master's degree, that's what I focused on. And my final MBA project was focused on exactly that. It was called Strategic Innovation in Continuing Studies at Assiniboine College, Adapting to Changing Learner Demands for Sustainable Financial Health. Now, if you're watching this, you're in post-secondary, and you know that's a very long-winded academic term for how to make money in continuing education. And that's what my project, that's what my research paper was based on, it was designed for, and I just couldn't put that as a title because, you know, that's not academic enough. But really, that's what the focus of my research was. And I'm not going to bore you with all of the academia terms, my sources. I'm not going to be sitting here citing my research. If you want to discuss it more with me, connect with me. I'm happy to. I will talk about this until you don't want to hear me talk anymore. But this presentation isn't necessarily about the specific research. It's about the results and putting those results and my findings into practical solutions that you can take back with you. Whether you are a program coordinator, an admin assistant, a dean, an associate dean, a manager, whatever your role is in continuing education in your institution, there will be a tool or a tip or a trick you will find in this presentation that you can take back with you and go, you know what, that just may work. And it's even more prevalent now because when I did my research and when I finally published it in 2024, I had to look at the slide to see when that date was. It seems like so long ago. It was really focused on post-pandemic changes to continuing education and post-secondary. But since then, when we've seen across the country with the change in the cap on international students impacting institutions all across Canada, it's even more relevant. Because as we are taking a financial hit across institutions, the focus, that lens is shifting to continuing education to bring in more revenue, be more profitable, and industry is demanding the short-term credentials that Con Studies has historically offered. So it's really this kind of perfect storm of the demand is high, the expectations are high, and yet we're sitting here going, what do we do about it? We need to make more money. We need to not only make our departments sustainable and relevant, but we need to make them fiscally responsible and help carry a little bit of extra weight that maybe we didn't have to in the past. So the attention is really focused on continuing education, extension programs within base, and how do we make them make money, not just in the long term, but for the future. So this is the problem. And as I said before, entrepreneurs live to solve problems. That's what we do. We see a gap, we see a problem, and we invent, create, or find a solution. And then we find people to sell that solution to. That's what entrepreneurs do. And I think too often we equate profitability with some kind of lack of ethics, and that's not true. While there are some unethical business practices, most business people are really there to solve problems. And I want you to think about every product or your favorite brand or your service provider. What do they do for you? They solve some kind of problem. Whether it is a soft drink or a financial advisor, you have a problem and someone is getting your money for you to solve it. So continuing education isn't much different. But we are at this kind of pivotal point where we have one unit that was created in an environment that doesn't exist anymore. We were created as, like a service unit. We took on courses, programs, community-based interests that didn't really fit into base programs or to diploma or degree programs. We were kind of like that catch-all, that we had limitations. We were created within the post-secondary institution using the same processes as everybody else, even though we were really different. Now we're expected to, or required, to function as a business. Now we're asking our continuing education departments for revenue, profit, growth, return on investment, all of the things that we ask from our business community. We're now looking at this unit that was created as an academic institution with academic processes, academic strategies and limitations to function as almost like a standalone business within the post-secondary institution. That creates a challenge. When something is created as one thing and then expected to perform as another, what do you do? And how do you make that change? How do you make it relevant? And how do you make it timely? Now more than ever, post-secondary institutions in Canada are feeling extreme pressure. Again, we were just coming out of the pandemic and all of the changes that came from that, the changes in workforce demand, the changes in online learning and accessibility. And the pandemic created a highly competitive market because now people are going online for courses and upskillings that are free or easily accessible. They may not come from an institution like ours, but they're out there. And so now we have this competitive market that we are actually slow to gain entrance into. And then, of course, we've seen what's happening across the country when the federal government made changes to the international student cap. We've seen, unfortunately, a lot of people lose their jobs, and we've seen some institutions even close. That creates an environment of uncertainty and scarcity that can actually, it can crack. When forces are working upon us, creating pressure from within and from without, it can highlight cracks that you may not ever have known existed. We are being asked to do more with less, and we're being asked to look at our continuing education departments in a way we may never have before. And I want you to take a second to think about your own continuing education department. Think about the people working with you and think about your own skill set. Are you being asked to do things you don't know how to do? I think we all are, and that's normal. In the entrepreneurial world, that happens every single day, but you're expecting it. You go into the entrepreneurial role, you go into that business knowing that you're going to be constantly pivoting, that you're going to be asked to do different things every single day. And for some of us, that's exciting, and that's what we love about it. But not everyone has that mindset, and for a lot of people, that can freak them out, and I get it. And that's what drove my research, and that's what's driving me to share with you some of these tips and tricks I learned today. Now, I know you might be thinking, okay, we're being asked, we don't know how to do it, we've never done it, and it's just too much. Well, you know what? I'm here to tell you, this is not a problem of potential. It's a problem of capability. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. What I mean is I believe that human beings have the potential to accomplish amazing things. I have seen it. I've seen it in my own career. And I've seen it throughout my time as a leader. I've seen people rise to levels that they never knew they could. The potential is not the problem. Every single one of us has the potential to turn our continuing education departments into a profitable, sustainable, energizing, exciting unit within our institutions. Those go-to, not, the funnel of what doesn't fit elsewhere, but a place where creation happens. And that's how I see continuing education. It's not a problem of potential. We have the potential. We are all superstars in our field. What we do have, though, is a capability issue. And this is one thing that we have in entrepreneurial mindsets that I don't necessarily see in other areas, not just in post-secondary or in education, but everywhere, is that sometimes we ask people to do stuff, and when they can't or when they don't, we assume that they're not able to. When really it comes as a matter of capability. Do they know how? Have we given them the tools? Do they have what they need to do what we're asking? And that's what's happening here when we are being asked to pivot our continuing education departments into high revenue, high profit, high growth areas with the same people that never had to meet those requirements before. Doesn't mean you can't. It doesn't mean you shouldn't. It just means that you might need a few extra tools that you haven't had access to before. Now, if I'm starting to sound a little condescending and you're starting to think, what is she talking about? I apologize. That's not what I mean at all. I am coming at this from a servant leadership mentality, where it's my job to help others do their job. And that means acknowledging that they may not have the tools they need. But you know what? I want you to think about it this way. When my toilet breaks, I call a plumber. Doesn't mean I'm an incapable human being. It doesn't mean I'm not educated, trained, or professional. It means I'm not a plumber. Continuing education is a specialty. Business is a specialty. Sales, marketing, curriculum development, these are all specialties. Expecting that you know or that your team knows how to do all of it it's a little unrealistic unless you've given them the tools and the training they need to do it. Telling someone who has worked their whole life in education to start managing their budgets and watch that bottom line and asking them about their ROI could sound like you're speaking a foreign language if they've never had to do it and never learned how to do it. Just like if you ask me to change the oil in your car, I'm going to give you that look because I don't know how to do it. It's not a judgment on you. It's not a judgment on me. It's not a judgment on our team. It's an acknowledgement of our capability limitations, and it's an acknowledgement of what we need to do in order to get our teams to where they need to be in order to manage those expectations. And I love this quote. You can't repair what you don't acknowledge, and you repeat what you don't repair. Continuing to ask for results without giving a team the skills and the resources they need to obtain those results is like banging your head against a brick wall. And in an entrepreneurial world, that is what's the difference between a successful business and one that becomes a learning opportunity. Because if we don't acknowledge, if we don't fix our mistakes, if we don't take the feedback from our customers or our staff, we don't grow. And if we don't grow, we continue to make the same mistakes, the money stops flowing. And I look at entrepreneurship and I look at continuing studies the same way. It's kind of a eat what you kill mentality. If the money's not coming in, you can't pay your bills. And if the money's not coming into continuing education, our jobs become redundant. So it's a matter of kind of self-preservation to acknowledge what we need to do our jobs better so that our jobs continue to grow and our department continues to grow. And when we see a lot of institutions across the country making cuts to staffing and departments, don't we all want to be not just relevant, but important? We want to be the go-to. We want to be the superstar of our institution. And that's what continuing education can and should be always, because there will always be a need for the type of upskilling, reskilling, and community development that we do in continuing studies. There always has been, there always will be. We just need to look at it a little bit differently. So this is where the hard work comes in. And it's where we start to really go into the hands-on tools that I promised you at the beginning of this presentation. So now that you know all this, great, what do you do about it? Well, reading another research paper is probably not going to get you there. But taking a hard look at yourself, your performance, and your team really can make a difference. And I'm not asking you to, write in the comments or message me and start giving me, a huge introspective. But I want you to really stop and think about it. Whether you are talking about your self, or if you're in a leadership position, your team. Continuing education, in order to be profitable and sustainable and that superstar division that I was talking about, needs a wide variety of skills. It's not just education, it's not just administration, it's not just curriculum development. Those are parts of it, but they're not the only parts. And this is what sets continuing education apart from every other department in your institution. Con studies is like an independent business operating within a broader scope. We have to know how to sell our programs. We have to know how to market them. And marketing and sales are two different things. Marketing and sales are two different things. I want you to get that through your head, because that's a mistake I made early in my entrepreneurial existence. Is I could market it, but I couldn't close those sales. What does that look like? What do you need? Do you know how to do that? Do you have the people around you that can? This is another thing that I learned as an entrepreneur. You can't do it all yourself. I know sometimes I act like I know everything, but I don't. But the one thing I do know is how to surround myself with people who know how to do the things I don't know how to do. And that's what makes your team so special. So who on your team knows how to sell, knows how to get out there and network, knows how to make those community connections, and to think forward and go, you know what? You have a problem. I know how to solve it. That's a person you need on your team. And you need to be able to market what you do have after it's created. So that person that's doing the sales and the networking and is going out there and shaking the hands can also be the person that is working on market research. They can be doing industry consultations. They can be bringing it all together. But maybe there's someone different. But regardless of who it is, do you have someone not just doing it, but who knows how to do it? Program development is essential, because we cannot just repackage the same things that we do in base program. Sometimes I guess we can, but not always. Industries might be looking for short term. They might be looking for skill specific. They might be looking for a micro-credential, but maybe they're just looking for a workshop where you can have someone go into their organization and do a skills assessment, or give them a specific skill training. These are all part of that pivot. It's about sales and market research, understanding what your customer wants and being able to deliver it. So once you find out what they want and you've marketed it to the point where they're contacting you and making sales, can you develop what they need? And can you do it in a profitable manner? I've seen a lot of people tell others, we need to watch that budget. We need to watch the bottom line. We need to, talk about ROI like it's a big, buzz term. And I've seen others go, okay, because that's not their skill set. Financial literacy and understanding that revenue and profit are two very different things. Knowing how to match projections to actual expenditures, and knowing how to make those projections and create quotations and estimates and financial plans, those are very specific skill sets as well. It doesn't mean that you need to be all of these things, But it does mean that you need to have access to these skills in your continuing education department. And saying that you just need to get it done without providing the tools that they need to do it is setting up yourself and your team for failure. Or as I should say, a learning opportunity. So once you've acknowledged what's missing, that's where it all comes together. It doesn't mean you start firing people and replacing them with business people. We are in the business of upskilling and retraining others. So we need to turn that onto ourselves. Organizational learning and development is what continuing studies does. It's literally our business. And yet, how often have you looked at your own team, your own department, and your own organization and done the same kind of training, upskilling, reskilling that you do for others? So once you've gone through and created this skills gap, and you can do it for yourself, and if you are, regardless of where you are, I suggest you do this. Look at your job description, look at your daily duties, and be really honest about yourself. Do you know how to do what you need to do? Because this is where psychological safety and vulnerability in an organization comes in. As a leader, you can tell people, I need you to do this. And if you have not created a psychologically safe environment, or if your employees and your staff and your team member are worried about being, in the next round of layoffs, or if they're in an environment where they don't feel safe to be vulnerable, they're just going to smile and nod, and then they are not going to perform. They're going to feel like failures. They're not going to be performing to the level that they can. This is where that capability and potential, there's a gap there. But when you create an environment where it's okay to say, I don't know how to do that, can you show me? That is the cream that rises to the top. Being able to say, I don't know how to do that. Can you show me? I'd like to learn. I'm unsure of what you mean. That's when we can start to bridge that gap. So if we look at our own departments and we look at our own selves and our own jobs from this organizational learning and development lens and go, what skills are we missing? What do we need to know how to do in order to perform to the level we are expected to? That's the shift. That is where we can bring our departments to where they need to be so that we can start running continuing education like a business. And that means people who know how to do the jobs that they're required to do. And if we can do it for others, I know we can do it for ourselves. We just have to turn that lens inward and focus on and acknowledge what we are missing. And that's a really hard thing to do. I understand that. It's super hard. But maybe pretend that you're looking at it from another perspective. Maybe pretend that you are a third party and you're evaluating their readiness for this job, or that your department is a client that's asked you to do a skills assessments need. However you need to do it. Maybe this is a fun team building event where management can kind of leave the room and just let everyone put it all out there. And there's some handouts available that I have where you can ask those hard questions. Now, I don't want to create, like a bitch fest. That's not solution oriented. But if we don't acknowledge what's broken, we can't fix it. So taking the time to sit down and go, what do we need to know how to do? What are we doing right? But what could we be doing better? And what skills do we need to be able to do it the way we need to be? That's where, rubber hits the ground, man. That's where we gain momentum. And we can start running our organizations like a successful business, be ready to pivot, and be ready to react. Because if we get that phone call saying, hey, can you provide us with a 1-week training seminar on this, but we need it in 2 weeks? We can go, yes. Yes, we can. It's going to cost you this amount of money, but we can deliver. And if that freaks you out, there is that entrepreneurial mindset yet again. And that's where I know we can be. That is the capabilities that we're missing. And we have the potential to get there if we acknowledge what skills we need to work on. During the course of my research, I have talked to hundreds of continuing education professionals across the country. And depending on when they came into Con Ed or where they came from, maybe they came from a different department in the institution or from private sector, their stories were vastly similar. And it was about this kind of idea that continuing education is like a side business. It's a support function of the college or university. And we've seen after the pandemic, and we've seen after the changes to international students, that we're not just a support function. We are a strategic engine. We can drive profitability, and we can drive the community networks that the entire organization needs to continue to adapt and evolve to a changing education landscape. Continuing education has the potential to quickly pivot and to develop new programming. We can be the test site for content that becomes our next degree that's in high demand. We can be the conduit between industry and education. This is our job. This is what we are. This is who we are in Con Studies. And we can continue to grow, not just be relevant, but to be that strategic driving force that propels post-secondary education into the future. Now, I promised you I wouldn't just quote all of my research and fill your heads full of facts and citations, and I won't. But I will say this, that all of everything I talked about today has come from not only my personal experience, but actual academic research that I can support and I can cite. And I'm happy to show you those citations. I'm happy to share my resources with you. If that's what you want, reach out to me. Happy to have those academic talks. But I'm more excited to have the conversations about where do we take it and what do we do with it. What's next for us in our roles, in our departments, and in our institutions? How can we take what's happened to the world of post-secondary education in the last 6 years and turn it into the biggest opportunity that we've ever seen? When COVID hit and shut down my corporation, it took me a couple months to realize that I had a choice to make. I could either lay on my couch watching bad TV and eating potato chips, feeling sorry for myself and how COVID destroyed everything I built and took away a fabulous career, or I could see it as an opportunity. And I'll tell you one thing, I'm here today because I chose to see it as an opportunity. And I hope that you take one thing, whatever it is, with you from my presentation today and find the opportunity for growth for yourself, your team, your department, or your institution. I would love to talk to you about it. I would love to hear your thoughts, share your insights. Reach out to me. I'm easy to find. But more than anything, I thank you for listening.